This is a smoke detector. You might recognize it from some of its greatest hits like... And who can forget? Huh? Now the only reason a smoke detector can remain such an annoying piece of kit is because it might kill you in your sleep if you don't treat it nice. I have one of these in my kitchen, and which is seems like a reasonable place for something like that, but it tends to go off every time I cook or bake anything, and that's not because I'm burning stuff, although occasionally I do. There's something about heat traveling up to the ceiling and wafting across this thing that seems to set it off. So you end up having to, fan it until it stops, then it just comes back on again right away anyway. So to try and fix that, I originally thought maybe a Bluetooth solution might be good for something like this. And I did make a video about that, and it kind of worked half-assed, but really it wasn't practical. I mean, who wants to get out their phone every time and load up an app and then, dick around trying to get that to shut it off? It just compounds the problem and you end up even more pissed off. And that failure led me to this abomination. That little green warty backpack on the side of the smoke detector is a bunch of stuff that receives infrared signals and then silences the alarm. So today what I'm going to try and do is take all the crap that's in that green box and shove it into the smoke detector proper. And that way it doesn't look like I've got the place rigged to blow. Focus. In a nutshell, here's how this works. An infrared signal comes in through the infrared receiver that's tacked on here. It gets decoded by the nano. If it's the proper code, if it's the proper signal, it'll trigger the relay, and that relay acts as a simulated button press on the smoke detector board. So we're not actually doing anything funky to the electronics of the smoke detector. Now, unlike some of my other videos where I'm just kind of feeling my way in the dark, this one I think is actually useful enough that I should show the build proper and maybe give you a list of things you might need to make it. So let's clear away the debris here and start fresh. Alright, first things first, you're going to need a smoke detector, and you're going to have to get one that A, plugs into the mains, and B, has a silence feature on it. Now, it has to go into the mains because your Arduino that's connected to this needs a constant supply of power. You don't want to have to be changing the battery on the damn thing all the time, since it's going to be constantly monitoring the infrared signal, right? Right? Okay, so that's why you need power source. Now, the silence feature is kind of a new thing for these guys. What happens is there's the middle button that you use to test it also is a hush button. You press it once, and what'll happen is it'll turn the alarm off for, I think it's around 7 minutes. I'll check the instructions, but it's around 7 minutes that it'll turn the alarm off for. So you need that feature in there. And now I tried my best to get this to work without that, but it's not easy to do. Now, if you can figure out a way to do that, more power to you, but this feature makes it quite easy to do this project. Okay. Alright, you're going to need an Arduino. This is a Beetle, and the reason I chose this one, A, it's small, and B, oh, I'm into the A's and B's today. And B, it runs at 16 megahertz, and I tried this whole setup with an 8 megahertz, let me see, I've got one here somewhere, AT Tiny, these ones, and I just couldn't get it to read the signals very well, so, from the infrared thing. So, going with this makes it a lot easier. This will set you back about $5. You're also going to need an infrared receiver. That's that there. And to power the whole thing, we're going to use an AC to DC converter. This is the smallest one I could find. It's pretty damn tiny. I used to have a coin around here for comparison. Where did I put that? There you go. If you're familiar with money, that's a quarter. And you can see it's pretty small. So that's where we're going to get our DC to power this, and we're going to pull it straight off the board from the AC on the board from the smoke detector. And the only other thing you need is a relay. And oh, here's the piece de resistance, my friends. This is a tiny, tiny relay. It's actually a surface mount relay. I realized only later, of course, that you can actually get basically the same form factor, but with you know, the pins, which would have been damn handy. But this is it'll do, right? Now, if you live in North America, chances are you're going to end up with one of these Kitty brand ones. This is the FireX, so I'll show you how to get into that. Probably similar for other smoke detectors. I don't know. Who cares? So flip it over and I'll save you the trouble of having to look at what's under the paper here. It's nothing. I don't know why that's even there. Anyway, there's little holes there. So they're just there to distract you. And what you're looking for is underneath this foam ring that runs the circumference of this, there'll be 3 clips. And if you peel the foam back, you can see there's 2 parts to it. There's a large wide part, and then there's 2 little clips on either side. All you have to do is get in there and push the clip on the side towards the center, and at the same time pull against the back so it pulls away. And then do that same thing for the rest of them. Could have used that one, eh? That one's easy to see. So there you go. Pull that back, lift it out. Oh, I must have clipped the other one as I... Oh, there's a tendency for them to re-clip. It's going to drive you mad. Alright, we're in. No, we're not. Son of a bitch. Sticky little bastards. Okay, we're in. So I'm thinking my best bet for getting this to fit is to have it fit right in here somewhere where there's not too much impeding it. So, and then we want most of the stuff to fit. Okay, that's, you know, I'm not really explaining this very well. So let's start over, shall we? Okay, what I want to do is I want to put the stuff, all my little bits and bobs, on the lid, and then just have a few wires connecting it to the actual board on here. So I need to find a place where all that stuff's going to fit, and I think it's going to be right around in here, so I'm just going to tape my components into the lid and then close it up and see if we're okay to go. So I'll just put some double-sided tape on this. Oh, grow some fingernails, man. Alright, so with those secured in place, let's see if we can get this to clip in. And it's going something like this. There we go. That's beautiful. I have soldered some leads onto the AC-DC converter and then plugged that into the mains, and we're just going to check to make sure that we're getting a full 5 volts out of this thing. Let's give it some juice. Whoa, bang on, 5 volts exactly. I added a few pins onto the Beetle board just to make it easier to prototype it. I don't think I'm gonna leave these on. We'll solder directly onto the board later. Alright, so this is ground and power to the board, and these are digital pins 10 and 11. One of them will be used for the infrared receiver, and the other is going to be the signal to trigger the relay. Here's our infrared receiver, 3 pins, center one is ground, power to one side, and signal to the other. Just check your, check the sheet to make sure that yours is the same. I'll put the model number of this one in the description below. Okay, so for the relay, it's got 8 pins on it, which means we're going to need the data sheet to figure out what's going on. So here it is here, and there is our internal wiring diagram for the relay. I have the non-latching version, so that's this. I get the direction mark, and I actually understand that this is the coil that, the electromagnet that gets energized, positive and minus, we can figure that out. However, this business, I have no clue what that means. So, in order to figure this out, I think I'm just going to have to do it by trial and error. Okay, fine, there's a little bit of feeling my way in the dark here. Alright, in electronic circles, I guess this is called dead bugging it, and I can kind of see why. So red and black here are energized the electromagnet. The question was, which pins actually create the contact on the other side? Initially I thought they would be opposite each other, but nope. The ones adjacent to each other are the ones that actually get put in contact, and I just figured that out by attaching the multimeter and using continuity test for that. Okay, instead of reinventing the wheel, I'm going to use the old smoke detector that I had the big green thing hooked up to, because it has all the wires already soldered on it. And I think I'd be a fool not to reuse it. So here's what we've done. So this is the back side of the board, and if you got an old floppy drive hanging around, this is actually the power connector for that. Pretty damn handy. It's a 4-wire connector, and you can get the male end, you know, from the floppy drive itself. Just desolder that. Pretty damn handy connector. I'm the connector king after all. So, okay, so what we've done here is I've soldered directly to the AC pins, the AC in pins. So you'll get one of these little connectors that hooks up to the mains, and all we're doing is, you know, soldering directly to that. So those 2 pins give us our power for our DC converter, and the other 2 are for the switch. Now the switch is located right here, and before you go ahead and solder these down, I would recommend that you just take a continuity tester and just make sure that those are the 2 pins that are going to trigger this switch for you. Now you're going to want to grab an old remote that you can use to control this thing. So just find one with just a few buttons, or it doesn't really matter, you can use a TV remote. You're just going to be using a couple of the buttons on it anyway. But you're going to need one now so that you can get the codes off of it. So I've got a little sketch here just to record the codes and then spit them out to the serial monitor. So we'll just press the power button here, and there we go. So you want to press it a few times, make sure you get a consistent code. Sometimes there can be some interference. So it looks like power is 382.341.26069. So you're going to write that down. That'll be one of your buttons. And then we're going to do a second button as well. I'm just going to choose the plasma one here because that sounds super fucking cool. And see, we got a few errant codes here, and then back to consistency. So depends on the distance, I think, from the remote. Anyway, doesn't matter. Now in my sketch, I'm just trapping for those 2 codes. So when we press let's say we press timer, we just get the code back. If we press fan, we just get the code back. If we press power, it knows that power has been pressed. Plasma knows plasma has been pressed. So looks like we're good to go for that. Okay, I've got the whole thing set up. Here's our power, Beetle, relay, infrared there. I've got the relay also hooked up to the multimeter, and it's set for continuity, so we should get an audible signal when the relay triggers. I've rewritten the sketch just a little bit in order to trigger the relay instead of outputting stuff to the serial port. So now when we hit either power or plasma, we should get a response from the relay instead. And here goes nothing. No response. Let's try power. Ah, son of a bitch! I got nothing. Oh, for Christ's sake. Might help if I plugged it in. Alright, red light indicates go. So let's try again. Power. There we go. Plasma should give you a full 2 seconds. And there we go. So, I think it all works. It's just a matter of throwing it into the case and hoping for the best. I cut myself a little hole for the IR receiver. Right, for the 4-wire connector, I'm just going to run the leads out, and then I'm going to cover the whole thing with heat shrink tube. So that should give me a nice safe connection between those 2. Here's where I'm at. I've got everything hooked up, but it's a bit of a tangled mess. I probably could have shortened up on some of the wires and done a better job with that, but let's just try and get it in the case and go from there. Now before you go ahead and tie this down, stick this down to the case, make sure that you've programmed it first, so otherwise you're going to have to be picking it off. So we're going to do that. We're going to just program this thing and make sure that it functions before we stick it down. Okay, I've got it hooked up to the mains. I'm going to go ahead and plug it in, and hopefully it doesn't explode in my face. All right, Well, that gave me a bit of a start, but okay, it seems to be okay. If I go ahead and use the remote on this, I think we still have... Oh, what was that all about? Oh, no battery, of course. Maybe it doesn't like that? That could be. So with the battery in, we don't seem to get those beeps, which is good. Well, let's start with the test mode first. See if that works. Just have a little peek under here and give it a shot. So that seems to work. Hooray, hooray. And now for power, what's going to happen is that should stop flashing. Why is that flashing? I'm thinking it's maybe not enough. Just let me look at the documentation here, because that seems like the same button that you would, or the same flashing thing that you would get if you put it into hush mode. Alright, so here we are. To testing, you need to hold it down for 5 seconds, so clearly we're not doing it long enough. So let me update the programming and try it again. Oh, I should say that when you're going to program this thing, I don't know if this is necessary, but unplug it from your mains. Unplug the battery power, because I don't think you want like multiple sources of power going through this thing, and then hook it up to USB. I think you should be okay then. Just to be on the safe side. You know what I'm talking about. Okay, so now we have it for, I actually put it for 5.5 seconds. So we'll try the plasma button and see if we can get it to test. Here we go. Alright, so I don't quite get what's going on here, but it would seem to me that after you do the test, it kicks it into the hush mode. Whereas if you press the button here, it does not. So I don't know why that is, but I can live with that, because this is going to go for 8 minutes and then we're going to be back to normal. So it's a little disturbing, but I'm going to forget about it at some point. So now all that's left to do is put this thing together and install it. Oh my God. And of course we can still use a backup battery, which is nice. And nobody's the wiser.
There it is, all installed. You can see there's a little red glow onto the right side there. That's to tell you that, well, that's from that little power supply thing. So the LED on there is indicating that it's active and running. And other than that, it basically looks like a normal smoke detector.
If you thought this doesn't look good, you'd be right. I ran into a small problem here. I was finding that I couldn't get this thing trigger unless the remote was like, I don't know, like a foot away from the sensor, and that didn't seem quite right to me. I went ahead and changed the batteries on the remote, but changed the IR LED, or the IR receiver here. Nothing worked. And then I realized, oh, you need to hold the remote far enough away from the receiver when you're gathering your codes. If you're too close, the codes are actually different. So hold it a few feet away when you're scanning for the codes that you're going to use on your remote. There's a little tip for you. Save you some trouble later. Mushrooms and smoking hot olive oil. This should make it angry. And there we go. So the red light indicates that it's in hush mode. It should stay that way for 8 minutes unless things get a little bit more crazy in here. Then it will override the hush mode and trigger again. And of course you can always use it just to test your smoke detector, because we programmed the plasma button on this remote to test it for the 5.5 seconds. So I'll just press that. So just to be clear about this modification, even though it looks a little bit jihadi, there's nothing about this that will impede the functionality of the original smoke detector. It'll function exactly the way it has in the past, with the exception that you can activate the hush using a remote, as opposed to getting up on a stool or using a broom handle or hammer to shut it up. Personally, I think this is something that should be integrated onto this board and made just part of these smoke detectors. Now, just one final thing. If you are planning on making money off of this idea, I would appreciate it if you drop me a line. And yeah, I'm talking to you, kitty. I realize there's no point in trying to patent or protect any kind of intellectual property anymore, so, you know, have at it, but at least have the courtesy to say hi. So that said, I hope you found this video enjoyable and useful, and thanks for watching. Cheers.